Shio Nagata, Aya Tsiskoya Dagwado A Tsalagi Ganti, Barbara Duncan Dagwado Yonega Ganti, Shudalshko, Galkwogi, Yagwade Tianda, Gaduni Geha, Tali Iani Diniotli Dagi Kaha, Nole, Zangilishi Nunki Iani Dagi Kaha, Hani Gedoha Gali Eliga, Nigada Ditsangotiha Gali Eliga. Hani Tokiasti, Zun Tokiasti Yi, Anit Salagi Ani Yamuya, Dane Hoi Gohidi, Nole Gohiga, Hani, Dane Hogwo. So I will continue my talk in English, but I wanted to introduce myself in Cherokee and in the Cherokee way. So I said, my name is Tishkwaya using Cherokee. My name is Barbara Duncan, you got that part, using English. I said that, so in the Cherokee way of introducing oneself, I said I'm 67 years old. I have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. I'm happy to be here today, and I'm happy to see all of you. I also said, because I want to recognize that this is Cherokee land where we are. So I said the Cherokees have lived here in Tokiasti, or what they called Zun Tokiasti Yi, for a really long time. And today they are still here. So there are students and professors at UNCA who are Cherokee. And of course the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians is located only 50 miles away around the town of Cherokee. Really here on part of what was their ancestral homeland. And so, yeah, so I wanted to take a minute to do that. In our classes, we say, Igang yi tsalagi niwi, speak Cherokee first. And so I also want to introduce my 2 colleagues who are here today. This is a big project that we've worked on since 2006. And so this is my sister, Susan Riemann-Snyder, who has done the programming that we'll be talking about. And in the back, John Standing Deer, who's an enrolled member of the Eastern Band, cultural ambassador for the tribe, stickball player, dances with the Warriors of Anigadua. They've performed here several times. And really the inspiration and kind of visionary thinker behind this. So I'm really glad you could both be here today. So we're going to talk about indigenous languages and polysynthetic words, software for conjugation. This is kind of a big, scary title. Jean says that we're at the university and no titles are too big or too scary. But I'm going to try to talk about this, or I'm going to talk about this in a way that hopefully everyone can understand. Feel free to ask questions. I'm going to leave time for questions at the end as well. And I'm mindful that some people need to leave to do other things and teach, so please feel free. We called our project Your Grandmother's Cherokee, and I'll explain that in a minute here. We have a website, you can go to our website. And so Cherokee word sentences are made of regular parts similar to a math equation, and this equation can be programmed to conjugate words from a known language, in this case Cherokee. The software can also break down and find the regular parts of words in unknown polysynthetic languages. And so we received a patent in 2015. We've created a dictionary with 80,000 words. Our work has also enabled us to teach Cherokee in a way that is actually easy to learn, or at least possible to learn with work and time. Yeah. Well, before, kind of impossible, so this is a big step. Last year was the International Year of Indigenous Languages declared by the UN, and in fact they are declaring a decade of indigenous languages following on the heels of this, yes. So the Cherokee elders say, we have lived in these mountains forever. The Creator put us here and gave us our language and our traditions. And of course here we are in the beautiful southern Appalachians. In the center of the original Cherokee homeland, parts of 8 present-day states, more than 125,000 square miles, and virtually all of the southern Appalachian highlands. This is Gadua, which is right between Bryson City and Cherokee, and we are, about over here in Asheville. One of the 2 things that people often know about Cherokees is that they had their own writing system. and it's just has become a national legend at this point for the Cherokees. This is a portrait of Sequoyah, a Cherokee man who, depending on who you talk to, invented or not the syllabary, and 85 characters represent the sounds of the Cherokee language. You can see that some of these look like English characters. This is the second revision of the characters. It was done in 1825 to make it possible to actually print the syllabary on the Cherokee Nation's printing press. And they immediately began publishing a bilingual newspaper that was very much against removal, the issue of the day. And their use of written language was part of their strategy to prove to the government that they were civilized so that they could remain in the Southeast. But in spite of this, as we know, the other thing that most people know about the Cherokees is that they were removed from the Southeast on the Trail of Tears in 1838 to what was then Indian Territory, and today Oklahoma, here, and we're back here. About 1,000 people were able to remain here because they claimed land in their own names. They hid in the woods with help from an organized resistance, and many of them walked back from Indian Territory in the years following removal. Over the next 50 years, people here in the east, in the mountains of western North Carolina, struggled to remain on their land, finally becoming recognized by the federal government, becoming recognized as a corporation by North Carolina. But in 1893, the boarding school system started here. This was the original Quaker boarding school in Cherokee, but these were quickly taken over by the federal government, which had a very strict policy of no language. Children were beaten for speaking their language. They were humiliated in various ways for speaking Cherokee language. Most children came to school monolingual in Cherokee. So at this point, for this reason and for other reasons, today Cherokee is an endangered language. And what this means, this is Joshua Fishman, a sociolinguist who you might or might not be familiar with, but he developed these stages of looking at how endangered languages are. And so this is where Cherokee is right now. Most users of the language are active, but they are beyond childbearing age. They are 60 years old or older, at my age also. And the people who are learning the language are not all in one place or one household. So this is kind of where we are with Cherokee. One of the problems is that the people who are the ones remaining who grew up speaking, there are only about 200 in the eastern band of Cherokee Indians. In Oklahoma, where there's a much larger group of Cherokees, Cherokee Nation has 350,000 citizens, but there are, again, they're not sure, a few thousand speakers who grew up speaking Cherokee language. The real problem today is the ones who grew up speaking the language did not teach their children. They made decisions in the 1960s, the 1970s, the 1980s to not teach their children Cherokee. And for a variety of reasons, this is something that's not talked about very much. We know that during this time there was a huge push for America, and TV was showing Leave It to Beaver, and everybody was trying to be American. And clearly English is the language of economic advantage, right? And as I think about this, as a parent, you want your children to be able to get a job, be successful, be independent. So even today, English is the language of economic advantage, right? To get a job, to go to college, and also socially, if you want to go to the movies or watch TV or go to the mall, speaking English gives you an advantage. And so the chain of intergenerational transmission was disrupted. And what the speakers now are finding, what the Eastern Band is finding, other tribes are finding, it's very hard to reestablish that. Some of the reasons Cherokee is hard to learn. In Cherokee, one word is equal to a whole sentence in English. So, Dagilan Wishtane Ha means I am working right now. This is an action happening right now. As I tried to learn Cherokee language for many years, and I read the books and the dissertations and the how-to books, listened to first the cassette tapes and then the CDs, and spent time with speakers, I learned what one of our friends in Oklahoma calls, calls Walmart Cherokee. So if you run into someone in Walmart, you might say, "Hello, how are you?" "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" "I'm good." That's it. And so I learned to say a few additional words, as people do. I learned how to say, "I'm tired," "Dagiawega," "I'm hungry," "Agiyoshiha," good universal comment. And I learned how to say, "Dagilan Wishtane Ha," I am working. I couldn't get anyone to tell me how to change this word into "I will work tomorrow," or "I worked yesterday," or "he or she is working." Neither the speakers nor the scholars could give me an explanation of how to change it. They gave me another big long word. Dulan Wishtane Ha, he or she or it is working. Cherokee pronouns are not gender specific, so this means he, she, or it. Do Dagilan Wishtane Li, I will work. Dagilan Wishtane Lungi, I worked definitely. But I could not put enough of these long words in my memory to have anything approaching a conversation. There are nouns in Cherokee which are easy. These are from the Cherokee Primer of 1846. Gada Gugu is an earthenware bottle. Gitli is dog. Ulsquetuwo is hat. Tlagan-i is tree. And so, yeah, I learned the words for colors, animals, numbers. That did not enable me in any way to have a conversation. And this is where many people are stuck today who try to learn the language. And then John Standing Deer said, there has to be a pattern. Everything in life has a pattern. He said, if we spoke this language for thousands of years, there had to be a pattern, and it had to be simple and easy. Now, at that point, I had not found anything in Cherokee language that was simple and easy. But I was beating my head against the wall. So we proceeded, and we looked at we conjugated words out of dictionaries. We looked at word lists going back to 1756, 1792, Cherokee Speller in 1819. We talked to speakers. Again, speakers couldn't explain how to put the words together, but they could give us words. And in this process, we found that terms from English grammar were not helpful. They were counterproductive. We found that terms from linguistic categories were not helpful either, because they did not they were not a close fit in any way to what was going on with Cherokee. When we threw those out and just looked at the Cherokee patterns in the Cherokee words, we found the pattern. And this is the pattern. This is what we call the grandmother chart, because as we checked our work, and we would go and talk to speakers and check our results and say, you know, we think this word for I will work should be this. And they'd say, yeah. And we'd check our results with the with fluent speakers, the ones who grew up speaking. And often they would say, I haven't heard that word since my grandmother said it, because we were using the full forms of the words, the complete patterns. So we started calling this Your Grandmother's Cherokee. And the way this works, just briefly, is that these Cherokee words have 6 or 7 parts. There's an additional optional column for tenses that people don't use anymore. They used in the 1820s, but they're not common today. But this column, you have to have who's doing the action, what is happening, how it's happening, and when it's happening. Every one of these long Cherokee words that's a sentence in English has these 4 parts. These 2 parts work together to create what we call tenses in English. And there are 12 tenses that Cherokee speakers commonly use today. The prefixes go in the front. That's what that word means. And there can be suffixes on the end, but these are the 4 essential parts. Now, you don't read this across like this. The way this works is that in each of these positions, there are some possibilities, and they are limited. So if you just look at the prefixes, there are these 7 prefixes. That's all they are. That's all there are. And if there are more than one on the front of a word, they go in this order. This column, who's doing the action, if this is an active word, there are only 10 people who can go in this column. Now, again, so there's limited choices. Again, this is different from English, and this is where we find that students have a hard time, is where it differs drastically from English, which is at many points. So I might be doing the action, you and I might be doing the action, you all and I could do the action, he or she and I could be doing it, they and I could be doing it, you one person, you two people, you three people, he, she, or it doing the action. That space is blank, or they could be doing the action. So if it's an active word, only 10 possibilities. Okay, then what is happening? Of course, there are hundreds. How many did we say, Susan?
1,400.
1,400 verb roots that could go in this column. But good news, if you're learning, these 10 people can go on about 700 of them. So learn these 10 people, you can apply them to many verbs. Again, possibilities in this column are limited. And this column, when John Stanley-Deer did the analysis of a very detailed article from a Cherokee speaker from 1830, only 7 possibilities here that combine in different ways with the rest of the word. These are the suffixes. That's all they are. They always mean these things in this position. And that's how the words are put together. Again, a very brief explanation, but that's what we found. And shortly after we figured this out, I went to visit my sister, and she was living in Iowa then, and I showed this to her, and she said, "This is a computer program." And then she said some things that were in English, but I didn't understand what she was saying. But it made perfect sense to her, and in fact, she wrote a computer program which can conjugate these words because they are so regular. And this is just a black and white version of that same chart. And maybe I will stop right now to say, does anyone have any questions before I go any farther? Or comments? Kelly?
So I noticed in the first chart there was a little note to see the who to whom section for more detail. So there must be some way of marking like case or object or agency, things like that.
Yes. So I'll skip ahead right here. So in that who column, those first 10 people that I showed you that can go with maybe half of the words, if the word is actively happening, so actively happening like, and again, and you can see the action, like I'm talking, I'm waving my hands, I'm pushing this button, I'm drinking, so you can see those actions. Those 10 people are down this side of the chart right here, these 10 people doing the action. Across the top, also the 10 people. These 10 people are doing the action to these people. So if that's what's going on, then you come down here. Okay, so I am doing the action. If it's just me doing the action, it's just going to be the G sound. But if I am doing the action to you, one person, then it will be gun. The V stands for the nasal short U sound in Cherokee. So gun. So if I want to say I love you, I would say gun ge you. If I want to say I'm helping you, gun steli ha, I am helping you. If I want to say I love you too, to my children, stung ge you ha. If I want to say I love you all, 3 or more, to my 4 grandchildren, it san ge you ha. If I want to say I love him or her, zi ge you ha, I love him or her. Cherokee, it's interesting, there's no gender distinctions in the pronouns. There is a distinction between living and non-living in the singular and plural third person. And so right here, they are the same. Sometimes they're different, as you can see if you go down here. But in the plural, if I say I love them, I'm talking to you about my grandchildren. Gat si ge you ha, I love them. But if I'm talking to an unknown quantity of people or not alive, so if I wanted to say like, I love rocks, or I love my ancestors, or I love everyone who's in Asheville today. I don't really know who that is. If I want to say I love everyone in this room, that is known. I'm looking at you. I know who that is. So those are the distinctions in Cherokee. And likewise, you come down here, if you want to say you love me. Valentine's is coming up. So skige yuha, you love me. Or if I want to make it a question, skige yuhashk, I add a suffix that makes it a question. Do you love me? And again, you doing the action to the different people here. In Cherokee, you can't do actions to yourself. There are different vocabulary, different verb stems, different verbs for that, different verb roots. So there's a specific word that is used for loving each other, adageyuha, or looking in the mirror. It's a different word. So okay. Now we come down here to this line that's highlighted. He, she, or it is doing it to all the 10 people. These, so this can be he, she, or it is loving me, agigeyuha. Again, I could make it a question, agigeyuha, does he or she love me? But these 10 are also used with words that are not active. So if I want to talk about being hungry, being thirsty, involuntary actions, wanting something, you can't see me doing it. Anything that's inactive, these are used. So I would say, for I'm hungry, I would say agiyoshiha. So if that makes sense. Question?
I didn't understand why that pronoun was used to say I'm hungry.
Because I am not actively doing it. Can you actively make yourself be hungry?
You're hungry.
You hungry yourself. No. You can choose to eat or not to eat, right? So eating is an active verb. There's a verb for I'm eating a meal, or I'm eating a round object, I'm eating a long object, I'm eating a flexible object, I'm eating a single food. So that's active, right? Because if you looked at me, you could see me eating it. But isn't hunger something that kind of like comes over us? I mean, I can choose not to eat, but I don't know when I'm going to get hungry. Like right now, I'm not hungry, but in an hour I might be hungry. It might just, or at some point during my talk, my stomach might start growling, right? It happens to you. Elena.
Is it state versus action type of verb?
You know, you could say that, and some people do call these the stative verbs, or they call them set A and set B. But again, we found that these terms did not adequately describe the Cherokee words, because some of these words like agwaduliha, I'm wanting something, in English that's a transitive verb, right? I want coffee, I want food. That doesn't work like that in Cherokee. It's inactive. So we actually went through the dictionary and we made a big list of which words start with G for I'm actively doing something, and which words start with agi or agua, and what do these words have in common. So this big list of like hundreds of verbs, which uses which one on the front. And what we found was that you couldn't say transitive or intransitive. You couldn't say active or stative. It was just, I'm actively doing something or I'm not. And if I'm not actively doing it, it might be done to me. He loves me. But they don't necessarily match up with transitive or intransitive. They don't necessarily match up with feelings. It just depends, because some of these words for feeling in Cherokee are actually showing an action. So the word for I'm cold in Cherokee, in English we think of this as a feeling, right? But in Cherokee, the word for I'm cold means I'm putting on a coat or a shirt. It's the action you do when you have that feeling. So that's an active word. So again, this is why the categories don't really apply, because a lot of the way the words are defined are not accurate, are not really accurate as they get translated into English. So did that answer your question, Kelly?
Oh,
Yeah. So I'm just going to rush ahead and say briefly that as we do this with students, this gives us a way to learn. We give them these worksheets where the words are broken down into their parts, their essential parts, and they practice putting in the 10 different people. A lot of the work we did has to do with how these words are broken down into these 4 parts. Because linguists don't necessarily break them down at all. Not all the dictionaries break them down in any way. Dwayne King's dictionary from 1975 did break some of the words down. But where he breaks them and where we break them, sometimes we agree and sometimes we don't. Because what we discovered in looking at these Cherokee patterns is that there is a way to break these words apart so that this is always consistent. See, this is the same for all 10 people. These are all you learn these will always be the same. These will always be the same. This, what linguists call the aspect suffix, even though it doesn't totally function as an aspect suffix, this is what's left. And even this can be predicted by looking at the patterns that you get when you look at words that all end with in a certain way in the present, can predict how this will appear. And so the other way that we organize this is this, we call this the matrix. This, same person here, but this does all the different tenses. This gives you the 12 tenses. And so you can see this is consistent all the way. If you look at this chart for every word, this column is exactly the same every time. So you learn what goes here, you learn what goes here, and then this is the only part you have to memorize. Because we can also give you patterns for what's going to go here. Does that make sense? Okay. So going ahead then, just tell a little bit about this. In the when column, very consistent. It's always like this. Every time you see it will be an action in the past. What happens in the how column tells you whether it's a continual action, like I was going, I was drinking, or whether it's one time, I went, I drank. So it will give you those meanings. You have to look at the whole word to get the complete meaning of what's going on. And so when Susan did her programming, this is what we come up with. So she programmed this so that you get all 10 people doing the actions in all 12 tenses. And what you see here is, this is the word for go. So I'm going right now. So here's the 10 forms in the present. Gega, inega, idega, ostega, otsega, hega, istega, itsega, ega, and anega. Here they are broken into syllables. Here they are written in Sequoia syllabary. So this gives you 120 forms for this one word, because then you have the command or immediate form, present in the continual or habitual. So I am going right now. So I won't go into the command tense. It's very interesting and very different from English. And then I go habitually. I will be going. I was going. Oops, I was going. I was going definitely. I witnessed it. I was going reportedly. I didn't witness it, but people are saying that I went. Yes, it works better for the other people, right? They say he went to Bryson City and drank beer, you know, but when they say I went to Bryson City and drank beer, it implies that I was pretty impaired, and when I'm telling you this. Anyway, so I will go, I went definitely. Cherokee again has these categories for the past that indicate whether I witnessed an action or somebody told me about it. And then the infinitive is actually a form that's conjugated with all 10 people in Cherokee, because there are not all these little prepositions like we get in English, to go. These little auxiliary verbs don't really exist in Cherokee. So you would use this in a sentence like, I want to go to Asheville. So Tokiasti, Agwenansti, Agwaduliha, I to go. But I could also say, I want you to go to Asheville. So Tokiasti, Asheville, Zainansti, you to go, Agwaduliha, I want it. So this is what you get from the conjugations, and also the negatives, because the negative involves a prefix which combines with the front of the word. So 240 words for each verb root. So this is our website. The programming that Susan did enables us to have a dictionary, which we now have 80,000 words in. It's like all these conjugated forms for the, I think, more than 150 verb roots that are most commonly used and that we use in our courses and that people use in conversation. You can search in English. You can search in Cherokee using English letters and English phonetics. You can search using the syllabary by clicking on the little box, and then it appears up in your search box. And then it gives you the word in English, in phonetics, in syllabary. It gives you a definition, and it gives you sound files which are syllable by syllable. So not a speaker saying the whole word. Cherokee Nation has a lexicon online with about 7,000 words pronounced by speakers. The bandwidth for that is huge. We're at 80,000 words. So you'll hear someone saying a syllable, agwe na, shan, e, so that you can learn to say the word, but it's not the whole pronunciation of the whole word. And this is a user-friendly web form that Susan developed, which is so much fun to use because you can use this drop-down menu with our more than 150 verb roots. You pick the root words you want, yes or no, happening or not happening. You pick among the 10 people who are doing the action. You pick the tense, and then it makes the word for you. There's the drop-down menu. Okay, and then this is what you get. Whether you use the make a word or whether you use the dictionary, this is what you get. So again, in the English, the sound file, the syllabary. If you need more information on the tenses, you can hold your mouse over that. It will explain the tenses to you. And then a definition. Any questions about that? Okay. Juan.
Have you had the opportunity to exchange all this amazing research with other linguists and scholars working in other languages?
You know, when John Standing Deer and I first saw these patterns, we did what was considered respectful in the Cherokee culture. We went to the elders and speakers and to the chief and showed them what we were working on. And they weren't really interested. And what we realized was that the ones who are speaking, they don't need this. They can call up every word that they need out of their memory. And the ones who really need this are the second language learners. Linguists are not very interested in what we're doing because we have rejected the linguistic categories that are usually used to describe and break down words because they are not really productive or effective for Cherokee. No offense, Kelly, I'm just saying this has been our experience. In 2016, we were able to have a summer institute here at UNCA with people from other tribes to share this work with them. And so people were here from the Yuchi people, Meskwaki people from Iowa, the Diné Nation, the Navajo people, Odawa from Canada, and am I forgetting anyone? So, and we spoke with them because what we found early on in looking at these patterns, and John Standing Deer has done more of this analysis than I have, but the same principle applies to other indigenous languages. And so in the process, we found this quote from Stephen Duponceau, who was first president of the American Philosophical Society. And he wrote about this basically from 1819 through his whole career, that the American languages in general are rich in words and grammatical forms, and in their complicated construction, the greatest order, method, and regularity prevail. And so we don't know that we're looking at what he looked at, but this is certainly what we see. He originated the word, or brought into use the word polysynthetic, appear to exist in all those languages from Greenland to Cape Horn, and they differ essentially from those of the ancient and modern languages of the Old Hemisphere, or at least of Europe. And so my aha moment on this was, again, when I was visiting Susan and went to the Barnes & Noble in Davenport, Iowa, and I was in the language section, and I picked up a book on Lakota grammar, and I was reading it, and I understood it because I could see the patterns in their language. And so the software that Susan has written also can deconstruct an unknown polysynthetic language. You have to have pairs of sentences where only one variable changes. So I am going now and you are going now. How are those two words different? And then you find those more pairs from different verbs, right? That are I'm going, you're going. So you need more pairs from different verbs so that you can isolate what's changing. As we got ready for the Institute in 2016, we worked on the Ojibwe language. And we chose this because it's in a different language family from Cherokee. Cherokee is considered to be in the Iroquois language family with Seneca, Mohawk, Onondaga, Wyandot, some that are not spoken anymore, Meherrin, Laurentian, the Haudenosaunee people who are mostly in upper New York State in Canada. The Ojibwe language comes from the Algonquin language family, which is a huge language family. The Anishinaabe people is what they call themselves. In English, they're called Ojibwe or formerly Chippewa. And so when we looked at their language, and again, we worked on it for about 6 weeks. We went back to their old grammars, their old dictionaries. And this is what we found. So there are essential parts to their language as well, but they are not in the same order as Cherokee. And so the ones that are in color are the essential parts. Again, who is doing the action, and these are their people. When the action is happening comes next. What is happening, or the verb stem, is way back here in this part of the word. And here is where there can be more information about who is doing the action. So, like, if I am doing the action, this is on the front, nothing is on the back. If they and I are doing the action, this is on the front, and this is on the back of the word. Okay, so as we looked at this is what we saw. And then there can be more information. All right, these are the essential parts. There can be more information. The negative goes here. There can be information before the verb that combines with this to, again, make what we call tenses in English. There are directionality can be built into the words. What we would call conjunctions and different kinds of words, again, can be built in. There's a second part to the negative that goes here. And again, suffixes. So this is what we found in Ojibwe, and we were able to confirm this with one of the participants in the Institute, Adrian Pushtanekwa from the Meskwaki people in Iowa. Meskwaki is an Algonquin language, and he confirmed that yes, this was the structure, and he was a speaker and a teacher of the language. Showed this to several other Ojibwe speakers who intuitively felt that this would work. Again, this is not this doesn't have the research behind it that our Cherokee work does, but just as kind of a proof of concept of how we think these other languages work. So this is our website. Please feel free to visit it. As you may know, I'm adjunct assistant professor here. I teach with Gil Jackson, who grew up speaking the Cherokee language in Snowbird, and we teach 4 levels of Cherokee. We're teaching level 2 right now. And we've had students from the Eastern Band who are students at UNCA, but we've also had many students who are just interested in how a non-European language works, or how a native language works, or because they have Cherokee ancestry in their family. And this is my final thought.
The wall.
Any questions and comments? Yes.
Can you give me your understanding of this word polysynthetic?
Help me out here, guys. You're
So just instead of these parts of the words in a lot of languages, we split words up. And the meanings are in different words, but to make a sentence.
Right.
You put different words together to make a sentence. But in the English language, the word is the sentence. And you have to put the different morphemes in different places, or switch out the morphemes to make the different sentences. But then that makes, when you put two morphemes together, that might make like a sound change, and so that's why it's hard to, as a speaker, it's hard to conceptualize why
Right.
it sounds so different to conjugate a word. Yeah.
I guess I was thrown by this. I understand poly, the synthetic.
The synthetic is the putting it together.
Putting it
Yeah.
together.
It literally just means made of many parts or something like that.
Yeah.
Made of many parts.
So
Yeah.
what's interesting is that the syllable boundaries don't match up with the morpheme boundaries.
Oh, exactly.
Right. And
Exactly.
that's part of the tricky part of it. So this is really cool because you can see the morphemes first before it goes into the syllables.
Exactly, because we want the students to learn, okay, you just learn these 10 people, put them on hundreds of verb stems. But the thing is, if you see right here in the who column, they are not syllables, right? Some of them are single letters. One of them is a zero, right? There's nothing there. And so that's why, they learn the parts of the word, and then they come over on the right on this worksheet to pronounce the word. Then they do put it in the syllables that match up to the syllabary chart. So if they want to write it in syllabary, they can, but also this helps them pronounce it. Again, we've found that the ones who grew up speaking the language, they don't think in syllables, they don't think in morphemes, they don't think in syllables, they think one whole word at a time. So for those of us who grew up speaking English, that would be like learning a language a whole sentence at a time. Yeah, it was one of the difficulties.
Quechua linguists, they talk about agglutinative languages.
Yeah.
Agglutinative, that's what however, I would say that speakers, they don't think in syllables, but if they want to go into the deep of the word, they can go if they want. In the case of Quechua, like they have big words, but they know that, if you start like reflecting about one word, you can go into long stories, I guess. But it's, I don't know in the case of Salagi, but I would say so.
So they still remember how to do that,
I mean, they know the pieces of the word. Yeah, for sure.
which has been lost. That's part of what's been lost in Cherokee. And this, doing this, breaking them down this way to be consistent down a column is why it could be programmed.
Yeah.
And so we didn't make this up. This is like in the words, right? We didn't have to change anything about the words. This is like in the Cherokee words. And we have been continually amazed that the language is, it almost seems like it's designed. It is so perfectly consistent and regular. As someone who grew up speaking English, which is like totally irregular, right? The spelling, the verbs, it all comes because it comes from 3 or 4 different languages. It comes from Germanic languages and French and Celtic and Norse languages. And so, you have mouse and mice and cat and cats. And whereas in Cherokee, the plural is always like, if it's alive, it's ani. Always. Period. So the rules are, in some ways so much more simple than English. But let's see, Susan, do you want to say anything?
No, I said what I wanted to say. Oh, except that in the programming, when I construct those words, that 120 that come out, the Cherokee is perfect. It's the English sentences that I have to go in and fix. Because it doesn't behave itself.
John, your thoughts?
You asked about the linguists accepting this and looking at it. In the beginning, there's something I looked at. We have had linguists working with our people since the 1970s forward. We keep losing speakers. They die, and the language is not being taught. Someone once said that if you keep falling away, it keeps failing. And you keep doing it again, think it to be different. That's the definition of insanity. They have not given us the answers. We've spent much money since the year 2002 until 2010. Our tribe on our little reservation has spent over $40 million enlisting the best of everything we could. And their education, their teaching, their principles have not done anything to stop the loss of our land. It has not improved it, it's not helped it, it's not done anything. So, my people, if this was a football coach, they would have kicked these people out. Hooligs and seasons, you don't stay. So, my thought in this was that I took a course, and the question was, something is wrong in the way it's being taught, or simply as a thought of how it's being looked at. I did not believe or understand that why would our language follow the rules of English when it's 4,000 years older than English? It's impossible. Or else, the Cherokee people went that way to give them their language if the principles came back across the boat for our language. And so that didn't make no sense. And I knew that our people had been speaking and learning this language for forever, so there had to be something. And so, if any of you go out and look at a tree, do any of you know what a poplar tree is? How do you know that?
Because of its parts.
Huh?
Because of the different parts of the components.
It follows
the
regular
patterns.
patterns.
Yeah.
Simple as that. You have a name for it, which that name doesn't mean anything. Your language doesn't mean nothing. If I say to you woman, and I give you the sounds of the word woman, how does it mean that word? Yet nobody thinks about this. So, when I'd seen this, what I thought was that there had to be a better, easier, simpler way for us to understand. For me especially, because I was looking, I wanted rhyme and reason, I wanted logic. I did not like the speakers, of course. I was kind of hard on speakers and I was kind of hard on linguists. And I came to change my mind on that. The linguists can only go by what the speakers have given them. A linguist can explain a word based upon the definition given to them by the speaker. Take away that definition and linguists can do nothing with that word. Okay, so what they took was from the speaker. Now, a speaker, which one of all of you are a native speaker of some language, and before you started the first grade, could any of you explain wind or water? Right. You can say water is something, is what I drank. Some people say life. That does not explain from your word what water is. It is simply this reference point. So there was an agreement somewhere because we're trying to explain communication. So when I go to the speakers and you ask why does Agwaduleha mean this, why does Edoha mean this, they have no answer. You're asking a 6-year-old to explain their language as a true world language. So now, if you ask a speaker, where does the language come from? They say it comes from God. You ask a linguist, how does the language get meaning? They say it's arbitrary. Well, you got the blind leading line. I'm sorry, that's a fact. And I've seen, we want to talk about data, we want to talk about studies. I've seen from 1974, when the linguists came in the language, they've seen it was a law, it was in there. And they have provided no answers. So that, to me, was throw that away. I don't even need to look at that. How can, what can I see to help me have understanding and learning? And I go back to how to know what I want to, poplar tree. It's kind of amazing in that Bible that says, you shall know the tree by the fruit that it bears. It's simply the pattern. And so there was another problem, a big problem. Nobody knows this either. Linguists were going by the English definition of the word. This lineup is by the sounds of the language. And what are we trying to understand? The language or the English definition? So we're way too, we're ocean apart here, because it is not English. But these things I've just said to you right here, nobody has solved it. Nobody even simply looks at it. If you want to go by the English as the apex of all languages, well, we'll stick over there. But if you want to understand what the language is and have meaning, for somebody like me, my grandparents spoke the language. Now my parents are not me. And I really didn't care. Nobody was using it. And as I got older, there's a group of us were put together by the tribe, and they said, well, we should look at the language. I said, okay. I said, look at this. I've never done it seriously. I thought, yeah. And when I took the course, Barbara was there, I learned one word. Gesti yeast the gata. Gesti yeast gata. Gesti yeast the gata. In the translation into English, that means I don't know. I don't understand. That's what it means. And because there had to be, they say people learn there's 4 different ways of learning, or 7 different ways of learning, 20 different ways I don't know. All I know was my mind did not match with what I was being given. And so I said, okay, I'm going to back up. And I said, I'm simply going to look at it. And there's a speaker. His name is, last name is Black Fox, Eno Lee. I'll tell you a story about his name in just a moment. But Eno Lee is Black Fox. We were talking about him, and he's a speaker. And he would tell me that they would start classes, and he was going to be a teacher. He said, the first class, 100 people in the room. Second class, 50 people. Third class, nobody. Now, there was a program started by our tribe, and they were paying a bunch of money. $50 to the speaker, which they call the master, $50 to the apprentice, the student. They were going to spend time together, each working day. They gave them, they were going to pay them so much. $25 a day or $25 an hour, which is pretty good. That's one-on-one. In a classroom, you say that's the best. They didn't get nowhere. They stopped. And I asked the learner, the student, and I said, what's wrong? He said, I cannot remember anything. There was nothing for his mind to grab hold of except a bunch of sounds, a bunch of words. The sounds, and even words, he couldn't correlate it. If right now, if I said to you guys, let's throw out a word, I'm going to say one word, and I want you guys to have a thought. And then I'm going to ask you what that thought is. Okay, car. What's your thought?
I got a mental image of a car.
What kind?
It was a red sedan.
Our car? You rode together.
I thought more of a storybook car,
But you see,
like an archetypal car.
that's what I'm saying, though. You see what I'm saying? There's no way to tie on to say, okay, this thing gives us enough information to say this is what we're talking about. And so, when I began to look and start thinking, I seen something. I looked at a syllabary chart for 1 full year. This is a syllabary chart. It's right there. It's on the wall. It belonged to my father. He was in work. I started working there, and there was something I noticed. I noticed that there were symbols for the vowel sounds. There were symbols for combination, consonant vowel. There was no symbols for consonant. And I thought, wow. I looked at that, and I knew there was a difficulty in people learning how to read because there was 85 symbols. So I looked at it, like I said, after a year, I thought, So I looked at it, and I took the symbol, because it's some type of meaning, and I let it represent a consonant. And then I pulled the vowel sign symbol down and combined it. Turned it into a true alphabet. Speakers hated it. Yet, I could learn to write that in one day. There are many people as speakers who have not learned to read and write their whole life. It's big, 85. And having a true alphabet, you could do, there was 20 something. Our alphabet's, the English alphabet, 26. And so I learned that in one day. And I thought it was cool as everything. Wow. everybody can learn how to write this in one day. Well, presented it, and no, they thought I had went out and took the cross down and burned it, and put up a devil mask. But again, according to the tradition, and as you were asking just a moment ago about splitting those sounds, they say you cannot split the sounds. You cannot do that. And but again, not one of those speakers who are our teachers have ever sat in a class and learned a from a chart of the syllables or in any order we need. They're simply teaching. If none of you would go and take your kids to someone today who only had a 6-year education in language or math or medicine, but that's in a way, that's what we're skipping. Until this was to be able to give people something to say, okay, now we can see the why we can see the patterns. And following the patterns, then you can go and do whatever. Now, which is really, this is why we do this, and it does apply to other languages. Again, it seems that linguists are not about teaching the language, they're about studying it. And what I needed was something to be able to understand and learn, so I could learn the language. So I could get, if I hear somebody, if I hear a Z, I know where it's going to go, if I hear a Ga, I know where it's going to go, if I hear a Ka, I know where it's going to go. And there's explanations, which again, no speaker can explain the language. They can tell you how they use it. And it's kind of amazing to be like right here, and I tell Barbara a good example, a house. There are only certain words you use in the bathroom, and certain words you use in the kitchen. Only certain words you use in the bedroom. Now, if you use the words from the bathroom in the kitchen, somebody will say, what's wrong with you? You know it doesn't belong. So, again, it's something to learn. It's about learning. And the speaker will say, you must be born into it, or you must be touched by God. And the linguist, of course, says arbitrary because it will mean whatever you agree about it. And so, this is a short and sweet of it. This is why we come up with it. The idea was that, I don't ask anyone to follow it. If you don't believe it, I'm not saying make the devil your God and throw your God away. Don't look at it. Leave me alone. This is for people who have had a problem, want to understand, somehow learn this wonderful language, so that we're not dying. That's the only reason it's here. And I'm happy that this school has accepted and allowed this. She's the principal. I'm happy that there are non-native people who are coming here and want to learn this language. I see many people. I've traveled my whole life, and people have been interested in the culture, their culture here. And this is one thing that does make us exotic. And you guys are here because you're interested. And this is what you do. It's all in the staff. Talk to them.
Kelly, you had a question or comment?
I just want to say, well, I wanted to ask if you've been in contact with CALLANG, the Collaborative Institute on Language Learning. It's a subgroup of the Linguistic Society of America, and it's a more contemporary approach to endangered language preservation and revitalization. So early approaches by linguists were not good. Like, linguists went into a community, tried to study, look at patterns, but like you said, they weren't interested in the teaching of the language. That is shifting now. There are groups that meet every couple of years, and it's called CALLANG, and they work with indigenous groups to learn about how to document and revitalize languages, and I think they would be really interested in this. So I'll forward that information to you this year. They're in Montana. The next one will be 2 years from now, but yeah, that approach is all about working with communities to get communities to be able to take power of their language. So I think there would be a lot of interest in this. This is really,
That would be great, Kelly. Thank
This is
you.
really good work. Yeah.
Thank you. We have presented at Symposia for Stabilizing Indigenous Languages, which is a very activist group out of Northern Arizona University. We've presented at the Native American Indigenous Studies Association, which is multidisciplinary, and at the Southern Anthropological Society. But no, I was not aware of that group, so thank you. Other questions and comments? And Jean, I think it's time to wrap up. Thank you for having me speak and having us all. And again, I do also appreciate UNCA and being able to teach here and share the language with people. Thank you.